Perfect. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Annette Mendez. I'm the Training and Curriculum Manager here at Good Grief. Today's session is part of our Good Grief Community webinar series, right? Every school year, we bring you um, information, content, experts as a way to really extend the work that we do outside of our centers and really bring it into this virtual space where we can reach people that normally we couldn't reach in Princeton and in Morristown, right? Just so you all know, anyone who is attending today's live session, you will receive a certificate of attendance within the next 48 hours. You will also receive a link to the recording. And if Dr. B would like to share her slides with you all, we will send that to you as well. As always, we always like to start from a place of gratitude. I'm grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you all and with Dr. B, as she so lovingly likes to be called. I'm really excited about this topic because, grief and trauma are things that we encounter in our lives, and it's something that we discuss the least, right? But before we delve into all of that, for those of you who are new to Good Grief, we are a nonprofit organization that's been around in New Jersey since about 2004. And our mission really is to build resilience in children, to strengthen families, and really empower the community as a whole to grow from loss and adversity. For most of our organization's history, we've been providing free and unlimited peer support programs to grieving children and their families. Starting about 3 years old, we like to giggle when we say a good grief kid could be anywhere from a 3-year-old all the way to young adulthood, right? We don't like to turn anyone away. And we do this in both of our centers, rather, one in Morristown and one in Princeton. And in recent years, our work has really been growing through education and through advocacy, and we're able to provide training, resources, curriculums to schools, hospitals, the healthcare industry, and other spaces to really just empower professionals and parents and everyone to support the needs of children and families who face loss and adversity. Here's a big picture view of all the work that we do, right? We have our family support services. We have Good Grief Schools. We just recently had our Good Grief Spring Institute. We offer tons of professional development and training, parent caregiver education, and the community webinar series that you are all a part of today. And before I hand this over to our wonderful speaker, we want to give a big shout out and thank you to our sponsor for today, which is the Lennar Foundation. And we want to thank them for supporting Good Grief and our work, these webinars and other work that we do broadly. They're able to come to you free of charge, right? And if it wasn't for the support of sponsors like the Lennar Foundation, we probably wouldn't be able to bring you as much work and as much expertise as we have, right? If you or an organization that you know would like to learn more about that and get their own shout out for 3 or 4 webinars, please email us for more information and we'll connect you to the right people to get that started. All right, so we have today our presenter, Dr. B. Dr. B is a medical doctor by training in France, and she spent many years at the bedside of people living with HIV, AIDS, and cancer. She was really one of those individuals, very empathetic, holding hands with the dying and counseling survivors. She is a childhood survivor of trauma herself and has thrived despite the odds, continuously building new dreams. She moved to the United States. She became a pilot. How cool is that? She became a mom, an executive leader, and an entrepreneur. And today she's really going to help us who have survived, some pretty life-altering experiences get back on track and find their new path to opportunities. So I'm going to stop sharing really quickly and hand it over.
Thank you so much. And I am so grateful to be here with you. And I'm so grateful that Good Grief is here to help children that are grieving. It's so important. And you'll see why when I start telling my story. So, welcome to the Kintsugi Path to Transformation. It's an exploration about what's really going on when we feel stuck inside and how to create change for the better. Are you ready for the adventure? The first question I would have for you is, are you a human? And hopefully all of you, whether on or off camera, will raise your hand. Now, the second question, more difficult, have you ever experienced any life-altering event in your life? And it's very likely that we would all raise our hands as well. Now, do you keep recalling some of these memories, sometimes painful or hurtful memories, and can't find a way to brush them off? That's a very critical question. And maybe in the chat, if you be willing, you can say, yes, that happens to me all the time, or no, I don't recall anything hurtful in my life. If you had a chance to take the survey, great. If you didn't, it's absolutely fine. You can do that later. But we'll reconnect the dots between the survey itself and the presentation. So just in case. Now, the intention I have today with all of you is, one, discuss what's really going on when we feel stuck, when we have lived a life-altering experience, when we experience trauma in general. And then I will introduce you to what I call the 5 stages of the Kintsugi Path to transformation. And we'll explore maybe where you might be on that path, and you will decide, if you be willing, where you would love to be on that path. And then we'll discuss, I don't know why this is going on. I'm missing one bullet. Then we'll discuss the 3 steps, the 3 things that you can consider in order to move on the path. A quick disclaimer, all of what I'm discussing is based on my own experience. It's basically my point of view, my opinion. I have read books on trauma, but I think I'm on the school of, real life, as you all are. So you can agree with what I say, you can disagree, it's all good. And if you have any question, please feel free to put them in the chat while I'm speaking, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So what is happening when we feel stuck? Anyone wants to put a thought in the chat as to what's happening when we feel stuck? Any idea? What could be really going on there? And when I say stuck, it could be really anything. Stuck in career, stuck in personal life.
Yes, Dr. B, we have in the chat, haven't fully accepted a new life, clueless, freeze, fight, fawn, empty, trying not to stress ourselves out by dealing with a hard thing, fear, insecurities, afraid or anxious about change. You get lonely, avoidance.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah,
feel
thank you.
stuck, it goes straight to my stomach. I have, my stomach always feels upset. So I'm like, oh. We also have protective procrastination. I love that, Evelyn.
Mm,
And a feeling of hopelessness.
awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And so this image of this little bear, it's a way to say, would this have something to do with trauma? But we don't like that term trauma. We were just discussing before starting the meeting about the fact that, we want to move on with life. We want to move on and progress and so on. And so we feel stuck, but if we don't understand what's really going on, it's difficult without raising our own awareness to do something about it. So that's what I'm going to offer today in terms of understanding and also getting a few tips and tricks that I learned along the way. This is just a slide a little bit about me. I'm not going to elaborate on this. You'll have the recording and potentially the slides, so I'm not going to elaborate. However, what I want to share is that my father, we were in a moderate, family living in Paris with 2 kids. And, we were not rolling on gold. And some months were a little bit harder. And sometimes my father at the kitchen table would basically bump his fist on the table and say, "Demain, ça va changer," which in French means tomorrow, this will change. And indeed, it changed one day when I was 10 years old on a Tuesday night in November, when my dad passed at home with no anticipation, no disease to get ready for, no hospital stays or long medications to prepare ourselves. One day he was alive, and the next day I was fatherless. What happened then is that I got into a very, very long tunnel of trauma, and I'll explain why. But what also happened, and that's why I'm so grateful that Good Grief exists, is that I didn't get any help. My mom had to deal with all the things, being a widower with two kids. My brother was a year and a half, I was 10. I had to move on with life, continue with school, help my mom with work and with the household. And I just chug along. I just lived, survived as much as I could. But I didn't get any support at that point. So that's why I think it's so important that we have organizations like Good Grief. What happened, though, a little bit more hopeful here with the light at the end of the tunnel, is that, yeah, it took me years to get out of this, but I found my path through that tunnel, through various modalities that we can talk about. And it took me years to even pronounce the word dad. I think I said the word again when I was in my 30s. I couldn't pronounce the name of my dad. I couldn't talk about the fact that I didn't have a dad. So I'm pretty sure some of you can relate to this. What I learned along the way when I got out of that tunnel, and I got other traumatic issues I had to deal with, I learned three fundamental things that I'm going to share right away with you. The first thing is it doesn't have to take years. But if we don't do anything about something like this, if we don't process or overcome that trauma, it will get worse over time. So if you feel stuck now and you haven't found the modality that will work for you, it's likely that it will get worse. Some of the other trauma that I had in my life stayed with me for more than 40 years. And it really started to get me at my throat every day at some point, about 2 years ago. And then I found a way to fix it. The second thing I would say on the left here is the issue is never the issue. So, for example, you may think it's because my dad died that I'm having all these issues in my life. But the reality is it's about the experience I had and how my brain connected that experience with other experiences and other events of my life. And then it's all jumbled up in our brain and in our body. And it becomes very complicated to fix because it's like having a huge knot with plenty of underneath knots and you don't know what to do with them. You pull on a thread and it gets even worse. So I call this the archaeology of the mind, and I'll elaborate a little bit more about that. The third learning I got is that there are modalities where you actually don't need to talk about what happened to you in order to process what happened to you. You don't need to talk about it. I have helped some clients to this day. I still don't know what we did. I still don't know what we were working on, but we worked on it and it worked for them. So basically, the message here is trauma is overcomable. And this is the first understanding we must have in order to be on the path to transformation, is to agree, to understand, at least believe, a little part of you can believe that it is possible to get out of that tunnel. All right, so what does actually happen inside of us? And that's basically a definition of trauma. And you can find many, many definitions, but this is the one that really resonated with me and help me understand the depth of it. What happens when we experience something traumatic, which means it's going to stay traumatic for us later on, is first, it's a threat to our own survival. Without that, it's an experience, but it's not necessarily trauma. Importantly, though, you need those four elements. And the second one is powerlessness. You have a coping capacity, and at some point you get overwhelmed and you can't cope with it. You can't manage it. And then there's the feeling of isolation. You're going through this alone. And then the last one is unexpectedness. So I'll give you an example. with my dad passing, it was unexpected. And in fact, even if we had like long months at the hospital, it would still be unexpected, right? Because when it happens, it happens. And you're never waiting for it. The isolation. I was not alone when this happened, but my mom was busy with things. The firemen were busy trying to resuscitate my dad. And there were some friends around me, but my own experience was very lonely. And powerlessness is because there's nothing you can do in that moment. You cannot go away. You cannot just stop thinking about it. You're in this moment and you freeze. I'm going to go back to the threat piece in a little while. In the animal kingdom, and I will remind you that we are animals. If you have seen a video on this, you can Google it on YouTube. A lion chasing a gazelle may lead the gazelle to play dead. And you've all heard about playing dead. Rabbits do it, and chickens, and so on. The ability to play dead has multiple components, but it helps the animal not feel anything that is going to happen to them, knowing that they're going to die. There's literally some process inside the body that numbs them, so they don't feel anything. But if they survive this moment and the lion loses interest and goes away, this is where the magic happens. The gazelle is going to go away somewhere, like wakes up from the playing dead piece, and is going to go somewhere safe and shake. Their whole body will shake, and they will shake off this whole event that happened to them. Once they have shaken this out, they feel good, and they can go back to normal life. We have the same ability as human beings. The issue is that we're not letting ourselves go through the processing of trauma in the moment. Unfortunately, we have this thing called the cortex and our consciousness and our society saying, oh, it's okay. You're gonna go through it. You're gonna live through it. You need to move on. Forget about it. It's nothing. There's a lot of things happening here that we could take a whole half day to discuss, but we're not going there. What happens is, if you go into fight on the right side here with the little kangaroo, or flight, you're actually doing something. You're not powerless. You're actually doing something. So you may have the threat, you may have the unexpectedness, you may be lonely, but if you fight, you are more likely to not experience long-term trauma. The one in the middle is the one that basically dooms us into trauma and the effects of trauma on the long term. The freeze response is a normal response, but if we don't shake it out, we're in trouble. Importantly, though, that threat doesn't have to be real. You know, when you watch a horror movie and your heart starts beeping, your heart starts beating really fast, and you start sweating and you start being scared. That's because your primitive brain is living a scene on TV the same way as if you were in that scene yourself. The primitive brain is very primitive. It doesn't make a difference between the two. So this is important. Why? Because our life and work stressors of today, the noise in the street, someone shouting in the meeting room next to you, someone passing you on the highway a little bit aggressively, all of that is perceived as a life threat. They're not, but they are perceived as such. And so what happens is that we accumulate that stress. And by doing that, we get into a sympathetic overdrive, basically. All right, so let's look at why Kintsugi. Kintsugi is a Japanese concept. It's art, and it means applying gold to stitching something broken. And you've been seeing this for vases. It's a very complex process. It's also an amazing and beautiful transformation. And so the whole point here is that a broken vase, you could just trash it, or you could just repair it lightly or with, bad glue, and it's going to be clunky. But if you put some effort into it and use gold, and as a symbol, gold would mean love, self-care, and wellness, then you transform to being potentially something even more beautiful that carries the whole history that you went through. So this is why I like this analogy, and I'm not the only one to have compared kintsugi and the art of trauma release. But I really think it's a great way to look at this with a different perspective. And a life-altering experience has the potential to do just that, to break us and give us this opportunity to repair and transform. Usually, some of us might go through that hurdle naturally and do the shaking, maybe in a virtual way. But most of us are not able to do this, at least not until now. These words are important to say up until now. If you feel like you're stuck, if you tell yourself, oh, I'm stuck, I don't know how to get out of this, please add at the end of your own sentence, up until now. It will send a little message to your brain that there is a way out of that tunnel. So what would qualify as a life-altering experience? I could ask you in the chat, but we're just going to go through this now. Not all life-altering experiences will be traumatic. For example, yesterday I was on another workshop and someone said, well, a life-altering experience is having a child. Well, hopefully having a child is not always traumatic, but trauma tends to be life-altering. For example, a car accident. For example, open heart surgery, liver transplant, long disease in the hospital with lots of tubes and needles. Grief, losing someone. A fire, an earthquake, a tsunami. So these are the first stage of the Kintsugi Path. What is happening to me is the moment where we are the victim of such an event. And so these circles that you see, we're going to build up that circle. But the first circle in the middle is your status, how you see yourself. In this moment, something is happening to me. I'm the victim of something. It's like the earthquake is happening now, or the car crash is happening now. We get the second circle, we get the inner experience. Our emotion is usually fear. And the outer circle is basically how we come across, so our behavior. And that's basically inaction, because by definition, if it's traumatic, you're powerless. You can't do fight or flight. So this is the first stage. And what does it look like? It looks like we're frozen. Something unexpected happened. It's threatened our life. We feel isolated and powerless. It might look like a normal child, whether it's your inner child or a real child. These are AIs, AI generated. My point here is that if someone is currently victim of something, you might not see it on their face. Let's look at the second stage. So let's imagine on this photo, the earthquake happened. It was yesterday. We have survived overnight. And where are we now? We are in the survivor mode. We just literally survived something. Inside, we might feel depressed, we might feel numb, we might feel a lot of different things. Outside, we might feel angry. What happened to me? Why did this happen? Why did it have to happen here? Why did they fire me from my job? And what does that look like? We all know PTSD. But again, it can look like this. PTSD can look like this. So basically, I could have put exactly the same photos. You won't see it on the face of someone, what's this inner experience of trauma. So, third stage of the Kintsugi Path is we went through an event, we survived it, and then the days are passing, the weeks are passing, and we get into a normal life again eventually. I call this being a thriver. The thriver is not thinking about the trauma every day. The thriver is living their life. They're getting successful potentially. They're building a family. They're reinvesting in their life. But inside, they might still feel guilt, sometimes a guilt of survivorship. And definitely at that stage, they feel grief. And they can feel that grief for a long, long time. And the thought here is what must be fixed. You have to redo the house. You have to rebuild your life. So that's what you focus on. What does it potentially look like? It could be a very successful professional, very successful in their career, and you won't see it on their face. So what's next? We looked at when we're the victim, when we just survived, and then we thrive. After that, there might be a potential desire for more. We're like, I've been thriving, I have a good family, I have a good career, I went through this big thing in my life, but I'm okay. But I want more. There's something missing. And usually, I call that the advocate stage. It doesn't mean you go into advocacy necessarily. It means you feel like you're beyond thriving. You feel like you can focus on who else can be protected. How can I help? And so you go into action, but you still worry. You still worry about the environment. You still worry about the society, the political unrest. But at least you get into action. So I call this like the superhero phase. You know, the one on the right you can relate to, but the one on the left is one of my childhood. Fantomette was a middle or high schooler, very normal little girl during the daytime, but at nighttime she would put her whole suit and fight the gangsters. And she had a cat, and I was allergic to cats, so I could really relate to her. She was the one that could have the cat that I couldn't have. The pain of a problem and the burning desire for something new are essential for creating new results in your life. So at that point, the advocate is longing for more. They want something better for themselves, for others. They want to give to the world, and they have this frustration of not being able to overcome what happened to them. But there's more. The fifth stage is, what if you can transcend all of that? What if you can actually free yourself from those triggers and from that past traumatic experience for good? So that, not that you will forget it, it's not about forgetting, but you can think about it and it doesn't trigger you anymore. How about that? How would that feel? That's what I call becoming kintsugi. And I call this also the stage of the healer. It's the stage where you become selfless. You're not just thinking about yourself or people you can help. You're thinking broader. You're thinking humanity. You're thinking civilization. You're thinking intergenerational. And you are at peace inside. And you are now available for guidance. And you can now be into an action of prevention and helping the next generations. So I'm going to take a little break here to see if that resonates with all of you. And where do you think you are on that path? And where would you love to be? So let's take a quick break here. If you have, so the little symbols here, let's imagine you are an A if you are in stage of victim, B if you are survivor, C if you are thriver, D if you are advocate, and E if you feel like a healer. And I'm going to ask this question in a very important way. where do you feel that you are on this path today, right now? Not in 3 hours from now, because you can toggle back and forth between these five. But where do you feel right now? In the chat, you have 5 letters. Awesome.
We have some B's, some D's, some C's, which I think is amazing. I'm glad that you said that you can toggle between all of them because I was like, well, this morning I was I was here and now I'm kind of in between these two.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have a between D and E. Yeah, between.
Yeah.
I like that word
Thank
because I
you.
think that's where I am in between.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And oh, great. Recognizing that you are a little bit toggling between A and B is very good for your awareness. And so not everything is lost just because you are in A stage at some point. It's okay. It's only like if you are triggered by something in your own house and suddenly you feel fear and suddenly you don't know what to say and you feel like speechless. That's you're in A stage. And that's okay because you can overcome this in the moment. But what we're talking about here is overarchingly in your life during your day-to-day life, you're going to have one of those that's more predominant. You're going to have one of those that you go to more often, right? And looking at this, you may feel it. You may realize that. And that's what my message is, as much as you can increase that awareness, then you can start reflecting and you can start taking some actions to change that and move on the path. Now, where would you like to be? I mean, I was in C, I was a thriver for decades. And I was fine in that stage. You can stay in C forever. It's fine. I think it's a little bit difficult to stay in A and or B all the time. But if you are mostly in C, D, it's absolutely good. There's no issue with that. You can still overcome trauma though. So we're going to talk about that. And yes, it is a dynamic, iterative process. We have knots to untie, and it takes time sometimes. So, of course, I don't have my last bullet here, but the last bullet is the 3 things that you can do. Okay, so 3 critical steps. The first one, I think I already alluded to a little bit, but I'm going to elaborate now. It's about understanding what's going on, understanding the underlying mechanisms so that we can separate ourselves from this whole nightmare and think, oh, there is actually a process there. It's actually neuroscience can explain this. This is not just me. I'm not the outlier and the one that cannot fix myself. Then we'll break that cycle. And then we'll go into the message will be about nurturing and we'll look into that. So understanding those mechanisms. If you have ever read anything on trauma, you would likely have heard about Gabor Mate. And Gabor Mate has been in the field of trauma and trauma healing for many, many years. And what he says is so important. Trauma is not what happens to you. In other words, the issue is never the issue. It's what happens inside you. And that's a result of what happens to you. But this is the perception. This is the experience, the inner experience that is the critical point. Remember, if it's unexpected, it's a threat to your life, it's isolated, you feel powerless, it's all inside. No one will really see it. It's all an experience. So I have just a couple of slides that are a little bit more complex, but I'm going to try to boil it down to a very, very simple message. Our nervous system, that primitive brain that I talked about, has functions through the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system has 2 components. Think about it as a scale, right? And if you are in equilibrium, you have as much stress response as you have relaxation response. And in fact, you toggle softly back and forth between the two. So the sympathetic response, we always think of it as the bad guy. It's not the bad guy. Every morning at 8 a.m., your cortisol level is going to peak. Why does it peak around 8 a.m.? Because you need to wake up. You need to get out of sleep and wake up for your day. So it's not bad. It's a normal process. And so your cortisol goes up, you wake up, and then you start going about your life and you're back into that little balance. What happens then is that you go to work and then there's a meeting that's stressful and now, ooh, there's a little bit of adrenaline here, right? And then you don't have the time to cool off or chill or like let it sit for a little while. And then you go out for lunch and then there's a car accident. And now you're like, woof. And then you go to the place of your eating and you look at social media while you're eating, which is not the best thing to do. And woof, you get here. So now you are in a sympathetic overdrive. Your parasympathetic didn't have the time to bring you back to balance. The bringing back to balance, which goes through mainly the vagus nerve, which is a very long nerve that you see on this image on the right, very long nerve in the body and goes all the way to the heart and the lungs and digestive system and even the reproductive system. So when we are in fight, flight mode or freeze, the sympathetic goes up. And if we process that experience, we go back in balance. If we don't process that experience, then we stay in sympathetic overdrive. And basically, all these functions that you see on the right-hand side, breathing, having good heartbeats, digesting, thinking of sexuality and reproducing and love, they go away. They get deprioritized. And then we have cortisol levels that are too high in our body, and that leads to cardiovascular disease, potential diabetes, insulin resistance, and so on. At the end of the day, the message is all of that is in the body. This object, which I have in real life, don't have it with me, unfortunately, is called a tensegrity model. Tensegrity model means tension and integrity. Imagine imagine a sailboat. You have the mast and the body of the boat. That's the sticks. That's the hard stuff. And then you have the sail and you have the lines, we call sheets, and those are the rubber bands in the middle. Our body is the same. We have bones, but if you were to take the fascia away, all the connective tissue, all this rubber band, our skeleton crumbles. It doesn't sit and stand by itself. We only have a body that functions because we have connective tissue between all of our bones, a structure. And if you were to pull on one of these rubber bands because it got stuck by a certain event, because it got traumatized, because it got less flexible somehow, you pull on that one, you shorten it, you will see the entire structure shift. The same way as in your body, if you go to a good body worker, you may have a pain in your neck, but the issue is never the issue. They might have to work on your hip because the issue might come from somewhere else. It's the same principle in trauma. We keep all of that inside our body. In fact, when you go to a massage therapist, I used to practice shiatsu, and shiatsu is very powerful with this. You have people who cry during the session because as you work on the body and the connective tissue, you release trauma that has been stored in the cells. When we have that thread, it goes through our, five senses. I would say even sixth sense, because you have intuition and maybe energy field around you. The speed at which your primitive brain is going to take in the information is extremely fast. And you have, again, a little bit technical, but I'm going to go fast on this. you have the historian hippocampus that has stored all this information from other events in your past. And then you have the amygdala that serves as an alarm bell. And they both work together to look at that threat, for example, a horror scene in a movie, and say, oh, yes, I recognize this is a threat. Perceived, but still, this is a threat. Amygdala, ring the alarm bell. And so as soon as that happens, the fight-flight response comes in and goes straight down into your body. Heartbeat accelerates, you start sweating, you start having fear. And that pathway is much, much faster than the pathway that goes to your conscious brain. And that's why we get hijacked by our emotions. So once we understand this, we need to train our brain to disconnect what the hippocampus has stored as memory and what the amygdala is going to do, which is its role of just ringing the alarm bell. I'm going to skip this. So how do we break that cycle? How do we train our brain to do it differently? I love this image because neuroplasticity is real. You can. You know, when we say, oh, I'm wired this way, this runs in the family, there's nothing I can do about this. I'll never be an actor. I'll never write my book. That's because we have created a pathway as if it had been like a beaten path, right? It has been, the cart has gone on that pathway so many times. It's so deep. The grooves are so deep. There's no way you can change that path. But the reality is, as in real ground, if you start shifting that pathway to another direction and then keep going that way by changing your thoughts, by changing the way you think about yourself, or by doing some work on your traumas, the cart can go in another direction. And it can be actually much faster than you think. Some scientists have visually shown under microscope neurons, nerve cells, reconnect with each other in a matter of seconds. And in fact, when I practice emotional freedom techniques and there is a shift in my clients' brain and memory, they feel it right away. It's like it takes a few minutes and suddenly a new pathway starts. Again, the message is trauma is overcomable. I have used emotional freedom techniques, but I think everyone needs to find the modality that works for you. Some people get through trauma through yoga, through music, through art, through expressing. So a lot of things can work, or a combination of things, meditation. So believing that it's possible to overcome trauma is essential, because you start creating a new path in your brain if you think that way. I can get out of this. In fact, I would even suggest that you ask a question instead of making a statement and say, why am I so able to get through this? And it starts with our thoughts. And I'll talk to you about this. I have a workshop on how you manage your thoughts. But the more important piece here is also it's okay to ask for help. And again, that's why good grief is so good here, because the children will not ask for help. So we need to ask for help for them. We need to advocate for them. The power of this is kind of then you have created a new pathway that allows you to be more conscious of what's going on in your life. Okay, and so nurturing, how do we do that? As I said, there's multiple things you can imagine you can do, you know, energy therapy, mindfulness, going into nature, hypnosis, EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy, you name it. Tons of different options. And maybe that's not serving us really well because we have too many options. And at the end of the day, we might not ask for help because sometimes it's easier to leave the trauma and our parts of us that are inner children that were hurt in the past, and we leave them in the basement instead because it's easier that way. But they're going to keep knocking at that door, and they're going to knock harder and louder as you grow older. So the message here is to encourage you to explore not only the modalities that can help you, but also once you have started that adventure, to nurture yourself. It's what people call well-being and, good habits. These are the ones that I have identified that work the best for me, but I think a lot of people talk about this, hydrate yourself, exercise, meditate, have some downtime, or play, sleep well, eat healthy. And the last one on the top here is about journaling. And speaking of journaling, there's many ways to journal, and I learned over the years multiple different techniques. And I actually came up with my own journal template, and I have a workshop that explains how to use it, because I believe we get the most out of journaling if we journal with intention. And it can help us design our life versus just living day to day and writing some scribbles on a journal. So what did we talk about? We started discussing what's really going on when we feel stuck or we went through a life-altering experience, and that it's really about trauma. And we explored those 5 stages of the Kintsugi Path. We reflected on where you think you are right now and where you would want to be. And yes, most of you would like to be in E. And I'm here to tell you it's possible. And then we looked at the 3 critical steps that you can take: understanding, breaking that cycle, and nurturing, creating good habits. And this is my end quote, which is from my favorite author. Richard Bach wrote a book that is kind of my Bible called Illusions, or The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. He says, you are always free to change your mind and choose a different future or a different past. When I read this sentence the first time, I think I was 15, and I freaked out. I was like, what is he talking about? How can I change my past? This happened to me. I was in victim mode, right? How can I change my past? This is what happened to me. I need repair. I need compensation. I need justice. And in fact, when you go through the tunnel and overcome that trauma, you feel this freedom where the past is still there. You still went through it, but you're not in it anymore. You become an observer versus being inside the frame. You're outside the frame. And in fact, when I work with clients with EFT, that's exactly what they describe. They're like, "Oh, this memory is fuzzy now. I remember it, but I don't feel it. I'm outside." A client yesterday told me, "Oh, I feel like I'm looking at it from outside the TV. I'm not in the scene anymore." So I would encourage you to take action, whether it's creating new habits, getting to more understanding if you need, and explore some really good books on trauma that I can send some links, and establish good habits. And you'll have these slides. You can always provide feedback, but you can provide feedback to Good Grief for this particular workshop. You can explore other workshops that I do, and you can always sign up for a free session with me. I told you about some of the other workshops I do. So this one is what I call a grounding circle, where we talk about meditation. We talk about some of these habits that you can create: meditation, tapping, stretching, qigong, and things like that, breathing. And then I have this other workshop about journaling with the template that I developed myself. And last but not least, I have what I call the vision workshop, which is about creating a life by design and having a blueprint for what your dream would be. And that's concluding my talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. B. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was engrossed the entire time. Thank you so much for that. Everyone in the chat, there is a link for our surveys. Just please let us know if this resonated with you, how it resonated with you, if there's any other topics that you would like to see. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly so that I can show you all our upcoming webinars. And please bear with me because my computer's acting a little wonky today. I'm not sure why. Can everyone see that? Are we good?
You're good.
Awesome. So on the 15th, we have our very own Michelle and Debbie. Debbie is Deborah. I should call her Deborah. She is a doctoral psychology candidate. She and Michelle are going to get together on May 15th, and they're really going to talk about empowering Latino mental health providers. The session really offers lots of tools and strategies that really will help promote peer support, talk about compassion fatigue. This is actually a something we presented at the Latino Mental Health Conference, and we got really good feedback. So I'm excited to share that with all of you. And then we close out our webinar series with a Spanish webinar. It's going to be talking about the cultural grief stigmas within the Latin American community. We're going to talk about how difficult it is for us to express our emotions. And the purpose of it really is to educate the Latino community about these stigmas and really promote emotional healing and encourage those who are in that culture to, seek out help and it's okay. So please, 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 if you would like, please register for those. We're excited to have those. And I'm going to stop sharing really quick.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was any questions or anything in the chat that folks had
A lot of thank yous, Dr. B. A lot of
so many
amazing
thank yous.
how trauma affects the whole body. I personally am like a brain geek, so knowing, because again, talking about Latino stigmas, in our family, it was like that didn't happen to you, right? You're fine. And knowing like there's certain dates, I share with Evelyn often like, oh, sometimes like today I feel off, and I look on my calendar and it's like, oh, it's the date
It's
of
an anniversary.
yeah,
Yes.
it's an anniversary of something. And that's just amazing to me. And it helps me to not have a kind of like victim mentality. It helps take me out of that because I'm like, oh, it's my brain. That's okay. Is there someone else wrote, thank you for this amazing workshop. We have for
Oh,
our
no, I put the link to the
oh,
traumasherpa.com/events. So if you scroll down, you will see, I believe, some of the workshops. I see there's the journaling and connecting and so many opportunities to get in touch or register or book a seat to be able to spend some time. It looks like there's a day-long retreat, lots of really interesting things coming up.
we also have a question in
Yeah.
the chat, Dr. B. Dawn wants to know, how do you deal with flashbacks?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So flashbacks are part of the PTSD syndrome as well. They're basically, so first understanding, right? One thing that's really, really odd with our primitive brain is that once it has captured the information about a certain trauma, it's going to store it. Imagine like your primitive brain has a huge library of drawers, right? It's going to store that event, but not as an event, not as folder event, traumatic event. It's going to dissect it first and break it down in terms of what did you hear, what did you see, what did you feel, how your body felt, the emotions, the colors that you saw. It's going to be very specific, but they're going to break it down in little building blocks and put those in different drawers. And then that's why sometimes you might be triggered by an element of trauma and you can't retrace what it's linked to because the primitive brain only opens that one drawer about a color that you saw. Like same thing as when you see a lot of rescued dogs don't like men with hats. It's not the man, it's not the circumstance, it's just the hat. But that's because their brain just pulls out that drawer of a hat. Now, why do we have flashbacks? That primitive brain of ours is trying to send a message to our conscious brain. Hey, this drawer is still there and it's heavy and you haven't fixed it. Can you please fix it? And how does it do that? It does that by either putting ourselves in the same circumstances and conditions as the trauma over and over again, or it just brings back that one little memory back to your consciousness over and over again, waiting for you to fix it. And instead of fixing it, we get re-triggered by it. And so it becomes a vicious circle where our consciousness says, I can't deal with this. It goes back into the fight flight mode. And when you get that flashback, you feel the whole trauma again in your body. It's re-traumatization by ourselves. So I would encourage you to look for a technique like emotional freedom technique or EMDR, any type of thing that is not talk therapy. Because one of the issue with talk therapy, and I'm not trying to say therapy is great, and I actually work with therapists when my clients are already followed. But some aspects of talk therapy is only you repeating consciously what happened to you, and it just goes back into your amygdala, goes back into your brain, your body, and re-triggers everything. What does it do? It puts that groove into that pathway in your brain, and it keeps digging down instead of going away from it. So that's what flashbacks are. And it's very difficult to fix consciously. You need to go back into the body and the unconscious brain. And a way to reach that unconscious brain is through tapping. And if tapping works for you, also vagus nerve stimulation, which I also do in Hopewell, can be an easy way to do it with a device. And I'm actually exploring doing both together.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. Thank you. We have one more question. Sonia says, why do I feel like my life is a roller coaster? I don't know where I am at any given moment. I could be fine 1 minute and a mess the next minute or the following day.
Yeah, I
A
think
lot of
this
us
is
can resonate with that.
I think it's the same thing, right? There are little moments in your daily life that will keep reminding you of something, but it's not conscious. It just keeps opening these little drawers. And so that's why you go from, oh, I'm okay. And then suddenly, boom, something happens. But this is why I call it the issue is never the issue and the archaeology of the mind, because just focusing on this aspect is not going to help until you know what the root cause is. And in order to understand the root cause, you can do consciously, you can do talk therapy and dig further down and further down, but it can have its side effects. So doing it through a method where you don't have to think about it is best. And when I said there's these safe techniques, like I have helped people about some issues they had and I still don't know what the issue was, there are very easy ways to stay safe in those modalities by doing, for example, I'll give you an example. That lady had something happen in her life, and we did an exercise where I said, okay, imagine that event in your life is in an object. What object could that be? And she chose a photo album. Okay. And I said, where, you know where that photo is, that photo of that event is in that photo album. She said, yes, I know where it is. I don't want to see that photo album. I said, where would you put it? And she put it like upstairs, far away from her, where she was physically at that time. We tapped. And after just one cycle of tapping, I said, so what do we do now? And she said, well, I can go upstairs. So she went upstairs mentally, obviously. And I said, where is that photo album? And she was like, it's high there on the shelf. I can see it. And I'm getting triggered. Okay. So we tapped on it. The next round, she took the photo album, she put it on the floor next to her. The next round, she was looking and flipping the pages. And the next round, she was looking at that photo, which I still don't know what it was. But that photo reminded her of that event. And we tapped on it. And at the end, she was like, I'm good. I'm not triggered anymore by this memory. So that's what I mean by that. You can stay safe. And that's why it took me so long to find help, because I didn't know that that was possible.
I love that. Especially for those who have trauma, that it's hard for them to articulate, right? Like when they talk about it, they feel like they're going right back into it. So
Exactly.
that's fascinating to
Mm.
me. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
We put distance. We do a artificial dissociation, basically. I mean, dissociation is a way to protect ourselves, right? When we feel empty and we know there's something really traumatic in our past and we feel empty about it, that's a way to dissociate, which means it's our way to survive. It's our way to thrive, to continue living our normal life without getting totally overwhelmed by it. And sometimes it goes through the filters and we get overwhelmed anyway.
Mm.
So that's the roller coaster.
I could talk about this the entire day. I don't feel like this hour is enough. I'm like so ready to like Google and join all kinds of things. I didn't know this existed, and I think this was so incredibly informative. And I think that's amazing.
Mm.
I want to give those who would like to drop off to go ahead. And Dr. B, if you want to go, that's fine. We have one more question. If you want to answer it, that'd be amazing. But I want to be mindful of everyone's time. You don't have to stay. You
Yes.
get your
Yeah.
You will
certificate.
Thank you.
still get an
Yeah.
email from
Yes.
us. You will receive your certificate of
And this is still being
attendance.
recorded, so you will not miss anything, I promise you. But there's a question that says, is this disassociation the same as the gazelle playing dead?
Yeah, in a way it is. In a way it is. It's a very effective way to not feel the pain that we know we're going through. So absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Thank you so much. I definitely want to learn more about EDMR myself as well. Paula put that in the chat. It's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. V, for being with us today. Thank you for
Mm.
giving us this knowledge. I think this was absolutely amazing. And hopefully we can have you again.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for attending.
Yes, have a great day, everybody.